Welcome back, Fight Friends, to another episode of the Mighty Shoutout Podcast. I think this is episode like 122, I believe. Anyway, in the house, we have, as I mentioned, Weight Cutting Ninja, Mr. TJ Whelan. Thanks for coming in. Oh, there you go, buddy.
Yeah, weight cut. Yeah. It's funny.
Thanks for joining us today, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the invite, man. I know I've listened to a lot of the podcasts before. A lot of my friends and clients have been on here.
Yeah, you
So,
bet, you bet. Which
I
will
knew
definitely
eventually
be.
we'd be talking together. We
Yeah,
pass
and
each other all the time.
that's right. That's what I was just going to say. And I see it all the events all the time. Now, where are you? First of all, thank you. I recognize this is for an old man, dad like me. That's an unheard of time of day. So, just kind of curious, where are you at right now? What time is it?
I'm still in Bangkok, Thailand for a little while. I'm going to go to One Championship tomorrow to watch the event, and it's midnight right now. But
There you go.
yeah, trust me,
There it is.
the best quote that I've always heard from like entrepreneurs is, "If you want to work 9 to 5, sure, but if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to work 24/7."
Yeah, there's no such
So
thing. Yeah.
yeah, I don't really care what time it is.
Yep, there you
So
go, man. Nice hustling. What still in Bangkok? What does that mean? What do you mean by still? How long you been out there? What's been going on out there?
I think I've been out here a little bit over a month. Came out here for a couple of One Championship events with the Road to One Championship winners from Canada,
Yeah.
Taylor and Cody, and just out here, man. Like Bangkok's an amazing place, especially with the weather. Like you're in Canada, I'm from Canada. You know what the weather's really like. So if I can avoid it, I'd
Yeah.
rather spend time out here. So just
Today
been
included.
enjoying the events, enjoying some training, enjoying the weather. Just as much time as I can spend in Thailand, I try to spend it here because it's just an overall good place to spend time and to grow as
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
martial artist. So,
Yeah, very
you know,
true. Where I know we slightly discussed this yesterday or a couple days ago, but if you can just fill everybody in, so you're not living in Thailand. Where is it? You said you're from Canada. Is that what you call home, or do you have a place where people send you mail?
yeah. No, I have a house in Canada. My parents live in it with me, and they just kind of take care of everything. But for me, I'm pretty much nomadic. I just travel all year round. So I'll go back home when it makes sense, go live in my house. But outside of that, man, I try to be on the road, helping athletes, going to different countries, living where I feel like living at the time. I'm going to go from here back to Canada, do some events out there, Samurai MMA, and then go to Dubai, do bare knuckle and karate combat. Just keep moving,
Nice.
whatever's next, whoever needs me, where I'm needed, whatever makes the most sense for me to go. I say when, you know.
Nice. How often, like, would you say in a year are you back in Canada? Like at home?
Sometimes less than a week or less than a month some years. Sometimes we'll spend a few months. It just depends on what makes sense, expenses, amount of
Sure.
clients, whatever's going on in personal life,
Yep.
Sometimes you don't want to travel all the time. But yeah, I've been kind of in the same remote nomadic lifestyle for the last like 7 or 8 years. So just kind of so used to it. It's kind of
Sure.
normal.
And the reality is clearly from what you said, like you're at home super minimal.
Yeah. That's why my parents live in that house. So it's something where I don't really have to
Yeah.
deal with anything, but I don't have
Oh, good
to
on
try
you.
to deal with something to rent a place when I'm home. It's very convenient. So good relationship with everybody out there. A lot of times I just try to live where I can, save some
Nice.
money where I can. But
Sure.
at the end
Sure.
of the day,
Cool. All right,
Canada
man.
is my home, but it's not the place I really try to spend the most amount of time anymore.
Sure. I got you. Okay, so uh, I know we kind of circled around this in November at the Muay Thai World Cup, but the reality is I've been kind of even asking AI and stuff like that, like having somebody. I'm the punch and kick guy. Um, this is fairly not. I wouldn't say new, but I'm an old man. But weight cutting, dietitian, all that kind of stuff. Like back in the day, what we did was you just didn't eat or drink for 4 days, and you were knocking on death's door. You did the sauna thing. You ran. You did whatever, and that was it. That was pretty much how it goes. Now, from my point of view, I would say that's kind of what everybody did, but it was. If I had to nail it down to one thing, it would be 3 weeks to shredded. Once Dolce, from my point of view again, had once that came out, I felt like that's where the old school got left behind if you didn't keep up, and it really became something of a major part of a fight camp, which, if my honest opinion, wasn't. I mean, of course, we have to make weight, but wasn't as honestly, I think important is the right word back in the day, as it is now, and it's a real process. So now we have, and I see your Instagram and all the fighters, friends of the show, everybody that is, man, I still get to eat and I feel good, and I'm not really that grumpy, and that wasn't how it was back in the day. So I'm just kind of curious if you can break down where your how you came about this, where your education is from, when you thought like this was an avenue. You know what I mean? Where did this whole process start for you?
Yeah, and I definitely spending time with so many coaches and managers and getting to meet athletes that have competed for 20, 30 years and some legends and stuff. I always go back to certain moments where I'm talking to people that were like even like Nathan Corbett back in the day when I'm talking about
Shout
the
out
lion
to
fight
Nathan
events, and
Corbett.
he's and even just certain situations like that, just talking to people, and then they're very curious, even
Oh,
been in the
I
sport for
lost your
20
mic,
years.
man. Can't hear
At
you.
the end of the day, man, like a lot of these people is where still
Nothing,
good.
nothing. Can't hear you.
That's weird. Coming on my end.
Sorry, man.
I'll just start back at the beginning of that. Unless you want to ask me that question again, I'll just start back at the beginning.
Yeah, no, man, just one more time. Go ahead. So I'll just literally, sorry guys, got cut off there real quick. My apologies. So we were just discussing sort of TJ, your background and the beginning and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But
Oh,
yeah, it's most of the time, man, it's like being a fan of the sport for a long time, pretty much the majority of my life, watching martial arts and being involved in martial arts, starting out as a wrestler in high school, you started to see the weirdest, dumbest things that people ever did. It's probably when it comes down to weight cutting. So that was always a very curious thing, is even less than 10 years ago, people didn't understand anything. And a lot of the time between people like Dolce and people like George and some of these other guys starting to bring some attention and actually helping athletes and getting some notoriety, that ended up starting to really start to open people's eyes that there's a lot better ways of doing things and to not drinking water, you're not eating, cutting weight in very stupid ways. And then the science has just progressed between people like the UFC PI and a bunch of other great nutritionists and dietitians that exist in the sport. The level that's gotten to the science in this like area of weight cutting is pretty much figured out almost at the highest level so that you know what to do to optimize this process. And even speaking with former legends and people that have fought for 20 years and have won countless world championships, it's always interesting when I get to speak with people that have had hundreds of fights or 20 years of experience and they did things wrong the whole time. And they kind of go back to that situation of how much better could I have performed? How many fights would I probably not have lost if I didn't feel like crap in there? How much easier would have things been? Because a lot of people, these people don't have a problem fighting. They enjoy it, they love it, it's what they're passionate about. The thing that they dread is the dieting and the cutting weight. Like these guys will fight on a moment's notice. You don't have to prepare them for that. That's what they're looking forward to. It's just a situation of people just push it to the extremes and then they take away the passion from fighting because of the magnitude of what it takes to make the weight class. So obviously, when I started out as a wrestler, I had people in the wrestling room being like, "Hey, I need to make this weight class next week. Like, what do I do?" And everybody's like, "Well, I've seen people online just put garbage bags and just like run around in the sauna or something." And I'm like, and that was my first like aha moment. And even like when I train with my original professor, like, do certain things like that, I sat in that room and I'm like, nobody in here has an answer. And it was kind of a curious thing where I'm like, there should be some type of, resource online or there should be some information. But, I
what
can
year was this
understand.
about? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. What year?
That was probably about 10, 11 years ago or so, or maybe even a little bit more than that. Uh, but in that situation, it was you still had the internet. I can understand the people from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or whatever. There's no real resources. You don't have the internet. You're just listening to what your coach did. You listen to whatever in the gym the people told you what to do. So that's always I can understand why people just listen to whoever's around them. And of course, you're going to listen to your coach, and whoever's the most experienced person, you're going to take what they recommend doing because you're hopefully that they figured it out so they
Right.
can tell you what not to
Relying
make
on
mistakes
experience.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can understand that's what a lot of people do. But a lot of the problem is it still happens to this day where a lot of fighters or athletes get bad advice from their coaches or trainers or teammates. who do not have any background or any understanding of what to do. Like, and most of it is probably the wrong advice, you know? So back when I used to train and started my martial arts journey, I realized like nobody really understood this. And then obviously watching the UFC and being exposed to, watching tens of thousands of fights, it's like there was always an area where now I started to realize that there was such a need for this. It wasn't like my ideal career path. I didn't try to go down to do this for a living, but obviously there's a massive need for it, and there's a massive need for proper coaching and proper advice and educating everybody from the amateurs to the highest level people in the sport. Everybody faces the same problems, and everybody, no matter what they are doing in what sport, if you're in a weight class based sport, people are cutting weight. It doesn't matter if it's the same day. It doesn't matter if it's 2, 3, 4 day competitions. People are still going to cut weight. You can
Never
try to do
educate.
whatever you're going to try to do whatever you can to try to, manage it. But at the end of the day, if anybody can get an advantage, they're going to try to get it. So at the end of the day, is a lot of people affected their careers or their performances because they cut so much weight and they didn't know what they're doing. And then that ended up being the whole reason why they lost, or they were not, able to really perform at their capacity in the cage or the ring. So
Which is a
obviously
common
people like,
story even sometimes still today.
oh yeah, it happens every week. And honestly, you can kind of see, and I have like an eye for it with some people where you can kind of tell when some person's not themselves in there,
Sure.
or even just like I watch a lot of weigh-ins that even if I don't have clients in the weigh-ins, it's just a thing where I tend to watch weigh-ins to see what's going on. And you can kind of see there's some telltale signs when somebody's like been through a lot or cutting a lot or, in a rough spot, but they got a great poker face, you know? Sometimes you can't really tell. And then as soon as they're outside of a public eye, yeah, that person's in a rough shape.
Yep.
But back then, yeah, people like Dolce, people like George, and a bunch of other people were starting to, draw some attention to this and, helping some athletes and getting some notoriety and, just furthering on the awareness of it all. And then from there, it's just been progressing over the last like decade. And especially in the last probably 5 years at least, especially with the UFC PI and especially some of the best dietitians and coaches out there that I've been friends with, we're just pushing the level of educating a mass majority of people so that there really is no excuse to be cutting weight wrong anymore.
Mhm.
There is enough coaches out there, there's enough information, there's enough ability to not make the same mistakes that people in previous generations did. So that's the good thing nowadays is that the information is widely available, but unfortunately, people still don't necessarily follow it or hire a professional that kind of understands things or is able to um, adjust things accordingly to that individual because you cannot tell the same person like that's the one thing I'll never try to attack any certain people or situations, but 3 weeks to shred it makes no sense for most people because it'll kind of not necessarily accommodate a light heavyweight to a 110-pound woman. So in that situations, it's not really customized or personalized for an individual. But at the end of the day, it still helped people at least have some general structure that was better than what they were doing before. But in the terms of it all, is me, I'm just a very, very curious person. I love to learn. I'm very science minded. At the end of the day, I just try to learn everything I can from everybody that I can, get mentors, do courses. I've cut weight with hundreds of fighters now. I've learned so much to refine my skills and the awareness of what works, how to time things, how to, you know, micromanage all the negative symptoms and effects that kind of can come up. And then at the end of the day, you can kind of personalize and structure something where a person can be well fed, still be drinking a lot of water, and manage all the things and not really have any issue being able to make a weight class within the reason of, the amount that they should manage to cut. But a lot of people would be massively blown away. And everybody always explain what my job is. They're blown away by how much somebody can manipulate within a few days and recover and perform at a world class level the next day. Yes, it's kind of dumb. But at the end of the day, this is the part of the sport, and this is the thing that the process of if you're not doing it, you're giving up a massive size difference to another individual. So if you do it the right way, do it safely, do it monitored, and you're allowing somebody to be able to go in there and perform the way that they should, then it's not very unsafe or unhealthy to do this if you do it the right way and in a manageable amount. But some people try to push the extremes and cutting 20 or 30 plus pounds in like less than a week and doing extreme things that nobody should put themselves under. But unfortunately, the mentality of fighters are so extreme oriented where they will push themselves to the extremes when they should only, try to focus on that during the fight because fighting's hard enough. You shouldn't have to suffer with dieting and weight cutting. Uh, it shouldn't be the hardest part. You know, it can be manageable. And if you have a professional or a team or you give yourself enough time, you shouldn't really have an issue being able to make your weight and recover properly. But yeah, honestly, there's a lot of side things that come about that. But at the end of the day, it's just like learning everything you possibly can from everybody that's in this field and every research, all the articles that come out, all the studies that come out, and just refine my skills. And the industry is you know, um, very upfront with a lot of the information now. Nobody's really trying to hide anything. So it's very
Can't
obvious
read the wheel.
to get better. Yeah, which is what I respect about the industry is everybody's very good at providing information for people to help everybody level up.
So it sounds like, and not that it matters, just curious, but it sounds like no actual sort of formal training. It's been you taking this head on and some trial and error and keeping data. And do I got that right?
Well, at the end of the day, like I have a good amount of training or education when it comes to like the sports nutrition side of things or the things about trying to learn about, there's two parts of it all. Explain this to a lot of my clients. It's like there's two phases. One is a fight camp, you know, it's trying to lose body fat, maximize, keep as much muscle mass as you can, heat acclimate, manage the amount of weeks and the amount of weight you have to get to the percentage where you want to get to manage your fight week. So that's phase one. And then you have phase two, which is your fight week, managing all the variables, structuring things between travel, the water, the diet, supplements, everything else, the actual cutting process. And that, depending on everything that's structured to that, is completely separate to what it is. But when you show up to fight week, you got whatever's left. You can't diet anymore. You're not trying to lose body fat. But on that part of things, I originally started to train with and work with George Lockhart way back in the day, like 8 years ago or more, when he was starting to educate some people and make people. So I was the first person to ever get trained by him and mentored by him and certified by him. And I worked with him and his company for a while, doing a lot of UFC events and with a lot of athletes. So I had a little bit of experience doing things on my own and, trying to help people here or there on like more of a local scene, especially in Ontario. But then obviously I got the process of getting access to like helping more higher profile athletes. And then from there, it's just been high profile athletes like the whole time. But then from there, I'm never satisfied with what I know. It's always just an endless search to try to learn more. So learning from people like Dolce, learning from people like, Tyler Minton or Ian Larios, or even my friends like Eric Chaligi or a bunch of other guys out there, like Jordy, the fight dietitian, Charles from the PI, anybody, everybody. I have good friends with people like Yannick, who's a very good guy in the UK. There's a bunch of guys out here where we're just science-based people that want to learn. And at the end of the day, if you have a good network of people that you can ask questions to and learn from, everybody just gets better. So I'm very fortunate of the network that I have to learn what I need to learn. But yeah, at that position, there was no school for weight cutting. You can't do a course about this. It's not, nobody would ever intentionally tell somebody to do this. It's only involved in this type of sport. So if you explain this to a soccer player, or I explain this to like my NFL clients or like YouTubers, influencers I work with and stuff, they think this thing is insane. Like anybody from the outside thinks this is insane,
course.
But we're so conditioned to it because we've been involved with the sport. We just know it's a part of it. But yeah, over the years, man, it's just constantly educating, reading every book, every course, every study that comes out. And obviously, you cannot replace real world experience. I've done so many hundreds of weight cuts. I lost track a long time ago. I've lost track of how many clients have even helped because it's not my priority of like a statistics type of thing. I just care about helping as many people as I can, educating people where I can, and making the impact of how I know how valuable this information is. And even like I had said a little bit earlier in a conversation with you, is when I reach people, like I remember this conversation very vividly. It was probably like 5 or 6 years ago, talking with like Nathan Corbett as a guy who's been like a 10-time, 11-time world champion, a legend in Muay Thai game.
Absolutely.
But he was very curious because he's seen at the time I was doing Lion Fight with Jake Peacock, who's you know very well and has been on
Friend of
the
the show,
podcast
man.
before.
Shout out to Jake.
And even with him, it's like he just pulled me aside and wanted to ask me so many questions and was so curious because he's like, what, like I don't even understand how you're able to do this, or what, how are they eating and what are they, how are they doing this, blah blah blah. And he goes, man, explain some of the things that he used to do. And a lot of these times I'm very curious about what people used to do. It's kind of a, you know, at the end of the day, I'm never going to repeat it, but it's a situation with a lot of people. They've done crazy, weird things from, like, you know, hundreds of athletes I've talked to.
What
If
are some
you
of the
can,
weird ones that you've heard?
honestly, if you can, it's like us, I don't know what the rule is, but if you can practically think about it, a person's probably tried it, you know? And honestly, I don't even want to bring it up because somebody will think like there was some validity or there's maybe a piece of information. It's like, I shouldn't even put that out to the world how crazy some people do things. And I haven't
Of
asked you about your previous weight cuts, but like, you know, everybody's got a weird story. Everybody's got a
course.
traumatic story or some weird weight cut that went wrong,
Very
or they're
true.
like, hey, this one went fine, and this one, you know, everything just didn't work out.
Yep.
And what did I do wrong? Did I do something wrong? Did I eat too much? Did I not pay attention to what was I drinking or eating?
Sure.
And that's the question is if you do not have a professional that's kind of laying out all the details, what to take care of, what to do, what not to do, and how to manage everything, then a lot of weight cutting comes down to timing. Because I've met a lot of people that have some of the right ideas, but they do things in a wrong structure. They cut things out way too early. They do things way too late. They go way too extreme. And then that's the problem that causes them to have issues. It wasn't anything about like they had a little bit of the right idea, but they did things at the way wrong time.
Sure.
And that was the reason why you get to that final part where you're just, you know, doing an active heat exposure kind of weight cut. And that's the most important critical position to get to in the right spot so you can manage and handle that in the right way. But most people get to that part and they're already massively depleted or excessively dehydrated before they get to that point. And then that part is where, you know, it's not the first 5 pounds you lose, it's the last two or three where, you know, that's when people want to call it, or that's when people starts to get tough, or your sweat rate slows down, or you're overheated. And that's because people didn't structure correctly or have the right guidance to make sure that they can not push themselves into those types of positions. But it's always interesting when I talk to people and then they were like, I wish I would have done things differently 10 years ago, or, you know, when I was competing. And I talked with a lot of, you know, former fighters and they were got that was a missing piece. I had nobody to help me. I had horrible weight cuts. I did stupid things. I tried different things every couple times. I found something that worked and then it stopped working. And they look back on their career with massive regrets. They didn't have this kind of help because they could have been able to, I could have won another championship. I could have performed differently. I know I would have won that fight if I actually felt good in there. Like I'm pissed that I lost that fight. Or there's a lot of those regrets, but it wasn't anything about their skill or their work ethic, their mentality. It was just they didn't recover and didn't rehydrate properly and went in there like, you know, 40, 50% of their capacity of what they were at training camp. And that's always the thing where I know how important this area is. That's why I'm very passionate of trying to educate people and why I've worked with so many hundreds of athletes is because I know that if I have worked with somebody for a period of time or went through multiple weight cuts with somebody, they're never going to make those mistakes. They have a structure, they have guidance, they have protocols to follow. I've had people that, you know, done like 15, 16, 20 of their fights in a row. You know, even like Jake, I've done every single one of his fights since his first pro fight, like his second fight. I've worked with him for his entire career. And that's just a situation. Like that guy will never have a problem.
Right.
Anybody, you know, I have a relationship with, I've never had anybody miss weight who I've worked with previously. And,
Mhm.
you know, I check in on so many of my former clients just to make sure everything's fine. They're on track, make adjustments, making sure everything's going good.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, if I help them for a series of couple fights and then now they're starting to have a problem, it's mostly they got really um, maybe too confident that they could cut a lot more weight or, you know, do certain things and they didn't really do the due diligence to manage their weight or they took short notice fights or they're like, I'll just cut 5 more pounds. And that's when you end up with, a problem. But yeah, it's always a humbling experience when you see how bad people have done things and how severe people put themselves into bad positions. And I'm just grateful every single client that reaches out to me or I get the chance to work with because I know how much I can help them or just make sure that they don't compromise their ability to perform on the most important day for them.
Well,
Because I just do my role and then they can go in there and perform the way that they deserve.
from the athlete's point of view, it's just like you can now have a social media manager, now you can have a dietitian and all that. Like it's just something that you can mentally let go of, so you can just concentrate on what you got to do. Right?
Yeah, yeah. My role is to take all the stress away from that individual. It's like, hey, man, I have confidence because, working with you or something like that because I know I'm going to make weight. I know I'm not going to have any issues. And then I'll reassure them how confident they should be in the situation. Most of the time, it's a big learning curve with working with somebody for the first time. But then once you work with somebody once, then it opens up this just like world of clarity and confidence in this area now. Because if you have structure, if I can do a diet with somebody for several months, get them to the right position, manage a full weight cut, manage the rehydration, manage the refuel process, they go into a fight feeling good and performing really well, then they're not stressed about doing it the next time and the next time. Because with anybody, if you've never done it, if you've never done it, you're still going to be a little anxious or, it's with anything. Like, even
Well,
some people have their first fight ever. It's like you don't really know how you're going to feel, the emotions or blah, blah, blah until it's over. But then once somebody goes through a proper weight cut once, it lessens the magnitude of how stressed they are about it next time. And then it gets better and better and better and better because you have more time, you have more confidence, and you're not so mentally anxious and stressed about it because you understand it now.
well, in the coach, regardless of the sport, the coach and athlete relationship takes time. You don't magic doesn't happen on day one. You got to learn each other, figure each other out, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that makes sense for sure. Um, so just out of my own curiosity, then, so let's say we don't have a relationship. I got a fight coming up 4 months. I'll give myself lots of time, and I decide,
Wow, that's a rare time.
sure, sure,
Yeah,
just to
it's
make
more
things
4 weeks.
easier.
No, yeah, great. I
And
like you.
I decide I gotta hire Coach TJ. I need some help. So um, at what point? Well, where would we start? I send you an email, a message, a smoke signal, something like that, and go, hey, I need some help. Where would the process start for a brand new athlete working with you?
Yeah, a lot of the time I just have typically just I always get people on a consultation call because you really need to figure out what they're doing and figure out what their main issues are, what they've been doing wrong. But a lot of the times it doesn't really necessarily matter to me too much about what their history was about doing things wrong. I like to really try to see what they've been doing and if they've been doing things correctly or where they need guidance or structure. Some people really just need to manage the fight week correctly. Some people, they need to do everything and they're consistent at training. They love training martial arts, but they eat McDonald's all the time or they just like drive through fast food for convenience. They're relying on cutting a bunch more weight because they're mentally tough rather than like, you know, doing things correctly.
Right.
But in any situation, it's just more about laying a foundation of typically how many weeks somebody has, how much weight somebody is, what type of body composition that they're currently in, what current structure of what their time management is between their job, between their responsibilities, and their training routine. I have big intake forms and structure to figure out how everything is laid out for that individual so I can analyze how to structure something for them. Obviously, as I stated earlier, there's a phase one that's eat, sleep, train, that
Yep.
type of mentality of dropping body fat, keeping a bunch of muscle, keeping calories as high as you can to try to manage weight and, optimize performance and recovery and sleep, digestion, stress, doing all of those things to make sure that that's managed. And then from there, you can try to, figure out how much somebody needs to be able to adjust the food and adjust certain things in their training camp so that you can get to the right weight for fight week. And typically, if somebody knows what they're fighting at, how many weeks they have to prepare, you're typically trying to get to a certain range. For most people, it's about 10% or less for a fight week for most people with a full day to recover. Just most contacts of people reaching out are not as many times for same day weigh-ins. Same day weigh-ins is a tiny percentage. It's different manipulations, but for a full real camp for professionals, you have a full day to recover.
How much?
And
Sorry, I'm just kind of curious though. How is it radically different between a 24-hour weigh-in and a same day weigh-in? Is the
yeah,
process radically different?
there's certain process differences for sure, but at the end of the day, the magnitude of your recovery window is the main reason why you're not going to cut. Because in that situation, there's a certain window of being able to recover yourself with electrolytes and fluids, but at the end of the day, your primary fuel source is carbs. And if somebody's been depleting themselves severely and cutting out their carbs severely coming into a same day fight, and you're only given a few hours, it really does not give you a lot of time to really recover and refuel your body. So the structure, you're going to manipulate way less percentages. And sometimes it just depends on how many hours you have between weigh-ins and a same day fight. So sometimes you still may have 8 or 9 hours,
Yep.
which is enough time to kind of manipulate certain things a little bit more if needed. But it's about choosing the right weight class to understand for that. And you shouldn't be cutting much weight. Most people in that position, it's like 2 to 4%, some people 5, depending on how much they can fluctuate very easily. And that number goes down the less hours they have to recover after that fight. Because if it's like immediately an hour or two, you're not really should be cutting anything. And I tell a lot of these types of people, they come to me and like, I'm going to cut, 6 kilos for the same day fight. I'm like, why? What are you doing? And just actually educate them of it should be better for you to go up. And a lot of those same day competitions are typically, even like I had a national taekwondo competition with some of my clients yesterday in Canada. And yeah, they have a couple hours to really recover from their weight check in the morning. They have like a random weight check in the morning, but you can only be 5% over what the weight class is. So you can't randomly gain 10, 12%, and now all of a sudden you got to weigh in again in an hour and a half. So the variables really control what the athlete's going to try to do. But when it comes to a typical like UFC weigh-in or a day before type of professional weigh-in, it's if you can structure the camp, the diet, the training, the sleep, the recovery aspects, and try to optimize every area so that they get to the fight week at the right spot. Then from there, a fight week should be easy because if you heat acclimate, which is one of the most important things that anybody listening to this, if you're an athlete trying to make weight and you are not a very high genetic sweater or have a crazy amount of sweat glands and like some people, everybody knows the guy that does the warm up and is already soaking the floor compared to the guy that does 90 minutes of Muay Thai and it's like barely
Sure.
dripping sweat, you know? But you can train yourself to sweat more and sweat easier and have better heat tolerance by heat acclimating. So doing consistent saunas, hot baths in a manageable range, 2 to 3 times a week in a fight camp will prepare your body for the weight cut. I use the example of you can train 2,000 times for a fight, but how many times did you train your body for the weight cut?
Right, right.
And that's where people start to realize they go, yeah, I haven't been in a sauna since the day before my last fight. And you're like, okay, do you think you're going to handle the heat well? Do you think you're going to be used to that exposure? And if you eventually get used to that, it's not that big of a deal. Somebody can sweat buckets, very easily. And I've had
Sure.
clients that used to struggle sweating 10 pounds and then heat acclimated, doing the right things. That can come off in like just a couple hours, you know? And that would take a full week for somebody. So there's a
Right,
lot
right.
of differences between training your ability to sweat and tolerate heat and allow your body to really make the weight cut more efficient. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of other variables besides just forcing yourself into, you know, saunas and hot baths and in cocoons, mummy wrapped and stuff like that, just to excessively sweat out. You can only do so much within a short window before you need to take a break or you need to continue it on the next day because you'll get sweat fatigue, you'll get overheated. And that's the biggest part with some people trying to do way too big of a cut is they don't really necessarily kind of manage it correctly and they try to marathon it. But when somebody gives you the right amount of time, ideally not 4 weeks and it's 4 months, then that's going to be the biggest variables about how their camp's going to be structured and if it is even possible. So
Right.
I get people, I tell them, you can't take that fight. That's ridiculous. Like, there's not enough time to prepare. the amount of a deficit that you would need to be in energy with dieting and training would just be like it's just not even feasible.
Backwards, right? You're
But
not prepared.
the people like I got offered this, like, can we do it? My most frustrating thing that I get is people come to me and they're like, hey, I already accepted this fight. I'm gonna do it regardless, like, but can you help me? And I'm like, you're putting yourself into a ridiculously stupid position. Typically, it's not like you're fighting for a world championship or you're fighting, to get into the UFC or
Right.
making a lot of money. It's like somebody who's like their first, second pro fight ever, they're making like $1,000 and they're trying to kill themselves. It's like, no, man, like there's fights every month. There's fights every week. Like just wait another month and then you can do that weight class. But it's typically about how much weight, how many weeks somebody has. So you can get them to the right spot for fight week and manage that last 5 to 7 day period to structure the protocols and all the science that goes into managing your weight. Because phase one is like managing a calorie deficit and, structuring everything so they can lose the weight. The fight week has nothing to really do with calories. It's about all the other variables like salt, water, carbs, fiber, gut contents, and heat management, and actually like your ability to manage the structure of like somebody's exposure to heat with whatever variables they're doing, sauna box, hot tubs, hot baths or whatever they have accessible or whatever they're the most used to or comfortable with. Then yeah, you can structure that. I don't really have a lot of concern. I've done so many weight cuts, but like if somebody shows up at the right spot and I know how much that they've actually had in their system, it's very easy for me to be able to have no issues for that person to make weight comfortably and have the confidence to give to them that they're going to be fine making that weight, even if it's my first time working with them or whatever it is, because I know how to manage all the variables, whatever's needed for that week. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's really just analyzing what that individual's at, where they're what they're struggling with and what they're currently doing. And then as long as I got enough time to influence them and they're, very coachable, I should be able to structure their diet, their training, their sleep, supplements, and, maximize their training camp so that they get to the fight week at the right position. I take over the, structure and do the right protocols for somebody to be able to manipulate their weight on the scale very easily to get to the point where they can make that weight class no problem.
Is it
But the one thing
generally? Sorry,
the,
go ahead. Go
the
ahead.
last thing I will say is that is really not even the most important part. It's a massive factor. Like you miss weight, it's not good, especially when you miss weight by a lot. That really shows. Like we've seen a lot of extreme weight misses in our lives. Like you're like, how is that even possible? Somebody missed by like 7 or 11 pounds or something.
Yeah,
It's
at
like,
that point, it might as well be 400.
yeah, it's a certain situation where like you messed up 8, 12. You messed up 4 months ago, like there's no rational reason why, especially if they made that weight class before. Like, but there's a lot of people, as I've said before, there's a lot of athletes that have made weight in most ridiculous ways and do things and, not drink water, not eat and stuff like that. They still make weight. You never really doubt the resiliency of a fighter to push themselves to make weight. But that isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is your ability to rehydrate and refuel so that you can actually perform that night, the next
Awesome.
day or whatever, and actually like win. Because yeah, sure, I made weight, but then you're like a zombie in there, and you perform like you have one round of a gas tank and you get fatigued, and then that was the whole problem. But it's putting the weight back on, putting the electrolytes back on, properly carb loading somebody, and structuring the way that they're refueling and rehydrating and everything until they're walking out to the cage practically or the ring. That is like the most important critical window. Because if you do that wrong, regardless of whatever you did to make weight, you're not going to perform because what you do in that 24, 30, 32 hour, whatever amount of time you're given, is the most essential to make sure that you're able to perform. It's not necessarily like what you did to make weight, because that's a battle. But that short window, if you do things wrong, you ain't going to perform well at all.
What just curious, at what point up to fight time, like at what point is your job done? You know what I mean? Like 10 minutes before fight time, an hour, the day, like just at what point is it like, okay, I've done my job. Now it's up to you.
Pretty much about 45 minutes to an hour before they walk out. That's pretty much like the last time I'll have any influence in what they're consuming or the timing of things, especially if, you kind of have a proper timing. But literally, like you have an ability to influence somebody up until the last like 45 minutes to an hour before they're going to be competing, and that's critical because even a lot of people with anxiety or a lot of people just don't have a good appetite on fight day because of nerves or something. And then there's a lot of situations where you have to adapt to an individual and digestive capabilities and stuff like that to still get in the fuel they needed. And I've had to like force feed people. I've had to make sure people get in things and like switch to a lot of liquids and a lot of like very simple concentrated things to get the right amount of fuel in for somebody and like stand there and like give them something and then like I'm not letting you like leave until you do anything. I'm gonna take your phone from you. Like just drink this. Like you need to get this in. I don't care how you feel. Like you need to get certain things in because once you get close to that fight, you can't really try to introduce a lot of things to somebody. So at the end of the
So,
day, everything is structured from the second pretty much when somebody starts to work with me, it's pretty much structured every single day, all the way up until an hour before they fight. And then the next most important part is your post weigh-in, your post-fight window where everybody just rebounds. They've been dieting so hard, they just binge eat. They put on 20 pounds in like 2 weeks, and they start the whole process again.
mhm.
So that post weigh-in rebound yo-yoing is the most critical thing for career longevity because once they gain a bunch of body fat, start gaining some fat cells. They lost muscle mass because they dieted so extremely in camp. And then they're starting with a lower metabolism, more body fat, and they put it on in a rapid rate because they didn't manage their calories or their
Right.
appetite. And then literally they get offered another fight in 2 months or 3 months. And then guess what?
Yeah.
You're trying to lose that 20 pounds again. And it's the same cycle. And a lot of people, every time you do that cycle, it's going to get harder. So some people I tell them you're not going to fight for like 3, 4 months. You may take a fight 5 or 6 months, but I have to like rebuild you. I need to like restructure and get you to the position where you're eating what you should, performing the way you should, and then we can manage trying to drop some weight. Because some
Well,
of these guys, they're already not eating anything, and then you're expecting them to lose a bunch of weight. You're eating like a pigeon. Like how you can't train more, you can't eat less, but you expect me to like rapidly get you to drop like 2+ pounds a week. It's just not going to happen when somebody's already burned a candle at both ends.
and
So
so just
sometimes
out
you
of
have to tell
curiosity,
them to
if a
wait a little
fighter,
bit.
okay, so what if a fighter, so this is my question. And if a fighter says, yeah, no, yeah, not gonna wait. I'm going. So you just go, hey, like good luck. I just can't work with you this one. It doesn't work for my system.
The different things about that is there's a level of if somebody actually has respect for trying to reach out to professionals or people that have worked with people of my type of level or anybody that they would reach out to, I have no problem if anybody works up with anybody as long as they're qualified and they can really help you. Like I can't help everybody, but at the end of the day, nobody would really help you. And some people sometimes need to learn it the hard way, and sometimes people I will still help them regardless. But there's a certain situation where if I can really educate you on why this is not smart or you can't make it or this is a really dumb idea and you still going forward to it, you're not really coachable anyways and you're going to do that regardless. The fortunate part about it is I've never really had that
Hmm.
of somebody being so boneheaded that I will tell them everything about how this is going to work or how this cannot work for that amount of time, and they're like, well, I don't believe you, or I don't trust you, or, what you explained to me very scientifically is not right. I'm
Mhm.
like, you reached out to me for a reason. Like,
Yep.
go ask anybody else. And at that point, usually they have a humbling moment enough to realize you're like, yeah, you're right. Like, that's not smart. Or, yes, exactly what you explained. This happened before. I'm going to say no, wait in there 1, 2, 3 months, and then they get a fight, properly structure things, go in there and perform well. Because in fighting, especially boxing, like I've worked with a lot of world championship boxers, and it's one loss. Like feel like you should retire or something. It's crazy.
Ridiculous.
Yes, Muay Thai, you could lose 50 times and you're still a legend,
Yep.
It's just a situation where like one loss sets you back 2, 3 fights or more to get back in that same position. So especially when you have momentum, you cannot be taking irrational fights in irrational times just because a promoter is offering it to you. Your career
You,
is dictated by yourself and your decision makings. But if you cannot
right.
control your out of camp weight and your position. When you have to when you get a fight offer that you want to take and you can't take it because of your weight management or the amount of time, that should be more of a humbling experience, that you need to be more disciplined and have more ability to control your weight and stay ready instead of getting ready. And yeah, nobody's going to be short notice ready all the time unless you're going up a weight class or something. But if you want to be at the highest level, you want to be a professional, you want to be a world champion or whatever, you need to be a professional year round. You need to be disciplined. You need to manage your weight. And you can't put on 35 pounds and then try to get it all off in 2 months.
For sure.
It's You're putting yourself into the most extreme positions where you're going to balloon right back up and you're going to be way more compromised showing up to the fight and also way more compromised after the fight to be able to sustain any of that progress. You're going to put all that back on because you're going to have to really be managing your calories, regardless of what your appetite and how much hungry you are.
So do you
So
butt heads with coaches a lot then?
I've butted heads with certain coaches, but at the end of the day, I've had clients that have reached out to me, but then their coach tries to get them to do different things or structure different things or whatever. And that's not uh, something that can be done. It's like I do not care about who I need to talk to. I don't care who they are, what level that they are. Like at the end of the day, we can have a conversation. I stay in my lane. Like I'm not your strength and conditioning coach. I'm not your boxing coach. I'm not your jujitsu coach. Like I don't tell them what to do. Yeah, I understand fighting. I train martial arts myself. I can give some, a little bit of advice. Somebody asks me for something, but at the end of the day, that's not my role. And I let people do what they're supposed to do, but I communicate with them all so we can be a team. So I have a synergy between if I do a boxing camp or something like that, they have like six different trainers,
Right.
but everybody communicates so we're all aligned to for that one person's goal. But if somebody is really going to kind of counteract what I'm trying to do based on, even when I started out, yeah, sure, a lot of less people will be less trusting in somebody that doesn't have a crazy amount of experience or a track record of hundreds of people making weight. But there's no way to deny what I'm saying. So
Sure.
typically, a lot of the time, they just need exposure to the information I'm providing to them. And then the coaches don't necessarily have an issue because the coaches actually love me because they're like, guess what? Now I don't have to deal with it.
Sure.
And all of my students are coming to me and I have to manage their weight cuts. And they're asking me about doing this and doing this. He goes, I got in this to like run a gym and to be like a Muay Thai coach, not to be a weight cutting guy all the
Right.
time.
Right.
So a lot of those times is why even like Dunamis or a bunch of other gyms in Calgary, it's like practically work with everybody in the gym or in many gyms because as soon as one or two or three guys, if they need to figure out what to do or they're going to get themselves into a weight cut, they go, well, just reach out to this guy, reach out to this
Yep.
guy. Like he helps me, he helps everybody. So obviously you reached out
Yep.
to me for a purpose. And if somebody has that big of a delusion or an ego to be like, no, I have the right way of doing things, I will see what they're doing. I
Yep.
will tell them what's wrong about it. And then at that point, it's more of an education experience. But a
Right.
lot of those things in the martial arts mentality, people are very open to ideas. People are very open to being coachable. It's what got them in that position, anyways. So most of the people are just happy that there's a person out here taking the stress away from other coaches,
Without a doubt.
and I can do it. Most of the guys are like, I'm just so grateful that you showed up because the most stressful part is the weight cut because I don't understand it. But everybody comes up to me asking me questions, and I'm afraid to give them the wrong information. I'm afraid to mess them up. I'm afraid that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really
Bless
know what I'm
whoever is
doing.
saying that, man, because most people just give shit advice.
Yeah, but the problem with it is like they are going to give you shit advice if they don't have a resource of somebody to reach out to or to talk to or to work with.
Of course. Yeah. You just regurgitate whatever you
So,
learn.
but that's the same thing as going back to when I was, a high school wrestler, or like started to train with my original professor and stuff like that. Being at a gym training with people, and I'm like, okay, you're cutting weight, but like nobody has any idea. And like, sure, some person can have a lot of experience, but it doesn't mean they know anything.
Sure.
And that's the disconnect where a lot of times, like, oh, you fought 20, 30 times, you fought at a high level. They go, man, I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yep.
And they'll at least be humble enough to say that. But, that's the good part about it is nobody really tries to clash heads with me. They're just happy that there's a person taking on this role, which is kind of like a niche. There's 15 other strength and conditioning coaches that will say like, oh, my program will be better, or, there's always things like this, or say you have multiple different types of coaches, or you do cross training. My gym's better than this guy's gym. I'm kind of just that solo role where I'm just, I'm neutral across the board. I worked with hundreds of people. The problem with it is a lot of my clients end up fighting each other, and I've had that happen so many times where I work with like it's the funniest thing to deal with, to be honest, but it's like an awkward situation because I'm like, I will go into one room and speak with one person and deal
Right.
with one person, and
Yeah, I
then
was
I'll
wondering
immediately
about that.
go to the next one, and then they're fighting each other. But the one thing is, there's two parts. I rarely ever get put into a situation where a client doesn't really not want me to help their opponent. Like, say I've had a long-term relationship with somebody, and they're like, and I will tell them, I'm like, hey man, your opponent's reaching out to me for help. But and I don't really allow this to happen anymore, but some people will be like, yeah, man, like I really don't want you to help that guy because then you're like, I know how much of an advantage I'm getting, like having your help rather than I'd rather him suffer. I'd rather him do stupid things. I'd rather him maybe miss weight, take some of his money.
Right.
And I
The
can
whole point of
understand
hiring
that
you is to get an edge.
yeah, and at this point, people really understand, and even people that I've worked with for a long time, I have people that are in a different gym I work with and they fight each other. And everybody's kind of neutral where I don't get into clashes of heads like, hey, why you helped him or just this, that, because I stay out of it all. Like I'm just making sure that this person doesn't mess themselves up, makes weight very smoothly and easily, recovers and refuels so that they can perform the way that they deserve.
Yeah, yeah.
They've trained for
Like you
months,
said,
they're passionate.
it's not your lane. You don't have to worry about it.
But the best thing it is there's two parts. If you're a really true competitor and you want to fight the best people, you know that that person's going to make weight. You know the person's going to feel good, and then you beat a person that wasn't compromised. So there's two parts of it all. It's like, do you really want to compete against the best? Do you want to compete against people that are, at the best at that night, or do you want a guy who's maybe not going to show up well? Sure, everybody wants an easy fight, but are you really like a true competitor to
You
really
always
want
want
that person
somebody
at
at
their
their
best?
best.
Yeah, and that's just the thing is they at least know that that person is going to not have an excuse or is able to
Sure.
perform well
A
and
little
not
bit of a
come out to them.
guarantee that they'll step on the scale correctly.
Yeah, so that's always a
I get it.
two-part thing. They're not happy that that person has the same help, but they're
They
also
have the
happy that,
confidence to know that they won't step too heavy on the scale.
yeah, or just they're gonna feel well and
Right.
perform well, that next day and they're not gonna have excuses, of like, oh, I didn't feel good or didn't perform well or, I cut weight wrong. So there's not that like additional excuse coming back from themselves, which sometimes is a legitimate excuse, but you should only let that happen once and then you should reach out to somebody and get help. And the thing about myself is I've worked with so many people in so many different countries. Some people, dozen, 15 times or more for, consecutive fights. It's even like one of my longest clients is like Jesse Arnett. I've worked with that guy for like well over 8 years. It was like one of my first clients. And like we've done like probably like 8 world titles together and just like I don't even know how many fights together. We've traveled the world together. Um, and even people like Jake, like travel the world with him for all of his fights.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of situation of developing really long-term relationships with people so that you're more than just the person that's cutting weight with them.
Right.
You
Part of
become
the
a
team.
friend.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah, you
big
become a
asset
part
for
of the
sure.
team. You become a person that's, I'm not just a person providing information sometimes. Like
Hmm.
hang out with these people. I'm a regular dude. Like to train with the guys, take privates with a lot of them, learn, I help them, they help me. That's the thing about martial arts is everybody likes to help each other. Everybody
Yeah.
likes to try to learn and teach. That's why I love even going to Thailand. Right where I'm like where I'm now. It's like I can go to random gyms, develop relationships with different gyms, get some privates with some very experienced coaches, and learn like from everybody. Because if you're a martial artist and you're a person that likes to help, all you want to do is just give. Like me, I'm just eager to just be like, how can I help you? That's
Sure.
just the way I approach things. Like I don't need anything from anybody. I just need you to be coachable, to listen to me, trust me, and then we can work together, no problem. Like I'm just here as a service. I don't have to work with a person if they don't want me to work with them. There's other
Sure.
coaches out there. I'm not the best coach for everybody, or there's other coaches that may be better suited geographically or personality wise. But at
Yep.
the end of the day, man, like I'm just an asset for people to have in their team or to work with their career to hopefully get a chance to help them. And regardless of the position I'm in, I still have extreme amount of gratitude and humility that no matter what, even I've had a lot of amateur fighters in the last quite a while. Those are actually my favorite people to work for.
How's that?
The reason with it is like if I get a kid who's, starting out in his career, I know that if I start an amateur with the right structure and the right discipline and education and know how to cut weight properly, I know that for the rest of their entire career, they could compete for another 20 years or something. They're never going to make mistakes. They're never going to know what not to do. So in that situation, some people it's like, okay, I've already had, 10 pro fights and 20 amateur fights, and I've done a lot of different things wrong and I've messed myself up, or they're already like slightly compromised or damaged by the time they get to help me to help them. Compared to a person that's never done anything wrong, never learned the wrong things,
You have to start
and
with a fresh
never,
canvas.
yeah, like you're starting with a person where I just know that like that fork in the road is that person's gonna just be focusing on getting better and like showing up and having good training camps and performing well. And that's the thing where like sure, I like working with extremely high level people. That for the public eye and for like, for Instagram or like notoriety, sure, I could list a bunch of world champions. But some of those people, the long-term value of the impact that I could have on somebody that's just starting out as an amateur, yeah, the finances are really the thing that they can't really manage as much. That's really the hardest part with some of these fighters. It's not a lucrative sport for practically anybody until you get to a good level. So that's the only situation. But I'm very accommodating with a lot of clients. But the situation is, if I can start with a person who's like starting out in the career, that's the most valuable time to get somebody.
Sure.
Because if somebody's already done something for 20 years and it's that, like, I've had people where it's like their retirement fight. It's like, okay, I'm working with you, but it's your retirement fight. Like, that's great. Sure, I'll work with people in your gym after this because
No
now
growth from that.
you have something. Sure, I'll still help anybody at any time. I
Sure,
don't care
sure.
where it is. Like I say yes to anybody, but it's a
You want to be
situation
part of the
where
process, the growing process.
yeah, but then they have the humility aspect of like, man, I should have done this 10 years ago, or I wish I learned this earlier, or I wish I actually realized like how much better this process could be if I actually had somebody taking care of it. My own ego got in my own way, thinking I already know what to do, or I have 50, 60 fights, I know what I'm doing. And then they realize that they weren't doing anything correctly.
Right,
And that's like a big wake up call, but it's more of a frustration thing where they didn't do it earlier, you
right.
know?
Yeah, I get it, man. Can't take it back. All right, man. Well, listen, I got a few minutes left here. I got some questions for you
Yeah,
from our
keep it
lovely
short.
fans of the Shadow Podcast. Number one, and I kept wanting to ask, but I knew this was a question, so I'm glad I was able to hold on. How many fighters do you work with at one time?
It's a very, very sliding scale in a sense. Certain times between 30 to 40, sometimes over 50 or 60 at a time, depending. A lot of the times it depends on certain people. It's if I've already had a relationship with them for several years or several fights, it's a situation of managing uh, the management of them and management of my time and stuff is very minimal in the sense of keeping things structured because they know what to do in every area between out of camp or in camp or what fight weeks are. A lot of people who I've worked with know exactly what to do, and I don't really even need to necessarily help them for future camps or all of their camps because I taught them exactly what to do. I try to be a quality coach instead of a quantity coach where I'm just, trying to take on
So how do
anybody and
you
everybody, but it's management of managing people. Sometimes that's not like say 40 people within a 3 month span and everybody's fighting within 3 months. Some of those times it's ongoingly throughout the year or spread it over time. But I don't really necessarily keep track or keep myself to a maximum limit. It kind of depends on the seasonality of the approach of things. And there's certain times I don't necessarily take on a person or two because I also have another business, which I'll shout out at the end here, which I run a professional chef business with a bunch of people to have professional chefs for professional athletes. So I have to manage that on the side, which is a good priority for myself as well. But yeah, if you're a right aligned person that wants to work with somebody like myself and needs this type of help, I'm going to take you on if you're the right person to work with me. So
so
I don't really put a cap to it, you
how
know.
do you decide who to travel with? That many like is it by like if someone's got a world title fight or is it the relationship? Like how do you choose who to travel with?
A lot of the time, it's more of expenses more than anything, because in certain situations, like I have sometimes several fight events at the same time within the same week. Sure, I can only be in one place. A lot of the situations, it comes down to a lot of the times I will go anywhere. Like if somebody's open to it, they need help, they have the finances to really manage it and cover expenses of certain things, then yeah. But I can still add a tremendous amount of value and do 95% of the same things without the hands-on approach remotely, because majority of my clients are remote. I can't travel for everybody, and most guys don't have the ability to spend for flights and extra accommodations because that's more than what they were making. But for certain situations, I'll travel for clients that I know they need me regardless of certain situations or finances, just because it's a good relationship builder, it's a good networking experience, or it's, certain
Exposure.
times you want to go to a certain country, so
Yeah,
sometimes it's
sure.
an easy trip without trying to manage things because I still manage everybody else remotely. But yeah, it's kind of a case by case. If somebody wants me there and somebody's needed and I'm valued and they're listening to me and we'll cover things, I'm pretty much open to travel wherever I'm needed. I don't have a wife and kids, so there's not really anything
Go
tying me to any
away.
place. If I want to
Yeah,
go somewhere, I'll go somewhere.
perfect. Who's your favorite fighter to work with?
I don't think I will state anybody specifically because it's not necessarily fair to anybody because there's a lot of people. There's
I
not really
agree.
anybody that there's people that I've maybe not enjoyed as much as other people because of things. I will probably say that'll be in the professional boxer realms because they're all focused on one individual. So they're not like team oriented in a sense, like compared to martial arts like MMA or Muay Thai or something. But yeah, honestly, like MMA or anybody in the Muay Thai community or kickboxing community, K1 and stuff like that, they're all very humble people. They're always very gracious. They're always very respectful. I don't really have anybody negative to talk about, or nobody is necessarily like my favorite person because, as you say, it's like I don't know how many kids you have, but it's like, do you pick your favorite?
Yeah, which one's your favorite
Like,
kid? Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's one of those
It's
types
kind
of
of an
things that
unfair
like,
question.
I like the ones that listen to me and well, my favorite ones are the ones that do not put on 30 to 40 pounds in between fights. Those ones. So
Sure.
like people
No.
like I'll use a good example and just because I know I'll listen to this as well. Like is a guy like I consider a brother is like Jake because he is so easy to work with because he's always in the gym, he's
Consummate
always in
professional.
shape, he's always disciplined. His weight is very easy to manage. You don't need to question that he's putting the work in
Yep. Yep.
because he's disciplined. He's about it. That's his tagline because he's been about it. He doesn't have to be about it. So situations like that, those guys are very easy to work with. People that are easy to work with are usually my favorite. Like I have
Oh,
gray
makes
hairs
sense.
in my 20s. I had a lot of gray hairs in my 20s from the stress that people put me under. So yeah, some people, I'm still grateful to work with them and add the value, but like sometimes I take the stress off that individual. But unfortunately, it's still a good amount of stress to manage sometimes.
Sure, sure, of course. I thought this was an interesting question. Let's say I'm assuming there is if everybody follows the protocol, is there any sort of penalty for you if a fighter misses weight or hydration?
Yeah, there's a certain situation in my own career. I've probably really had less than two, three people ever, really only probably I think less than two people ever miss weight.
Okay,
And and even in that situation, there's certain situations where somebody needs to do what they're supposed to do.
right.
And in situations, a lot of the times, if I've had certain things that have gone wrong, certain things go on, a lot of times if I take accountability and responsibility, like at the end of the day, like mistakes can happen and
Of
people
course, of
can
course.
understand what they're doing. A lot of times, I won't even necessarily even charge the person because it depends on where the responsibility lies upon, or where the certain situation comes into play. Where you can bring a horse to water, you can educate anybody, but if somebody doesn't really want to do what they're supposed to do,
Sure.
if
I'll get
somebody
the
doesn't want
result.
to go into a sauna or get into a bathtub, like there's not really much I can tell somebody
Yep.
what to do. If I'm
Yeah, yeah.
not physically in there. Like some people expect me to maybe like lock them in there like the Ultimate Fighter or something.
Right,
Just like
right.
try to kill somebody and put a broom handle over the sauna just to lock them in there so they can't like quit on themselves.
Yeah,
And there's a certain situation where people mentally kind of quit on themselves, and I can understand like it's tough. But you know, that's a situation where like in a case by case basis on what's going on, I'm very humble in the sense of like understanding that, I'm still learning. You
certainly.
know, I don't really have anybody ever miss weight in any situation, but it's a smart situation of always just approaching it with your own humility
Yep.
to understand what went wrong or what to improve. But it's not, if it was strictly my issue, then it's something that I would work out with that individual. And at that
Cool.
point, I know that if they're compromised with their finances, I'm not going to be charging them the same, or sometimes I won't even charge them at all. But that's a situation where it's not really come up in any sense. But it's, that's with anybody. If somebody falls short or makes mistakes shouldn't be accountable for the same thing as
Sure.
well.
And we're not robots. I mean, everyone, we're humans.
Yeah, there's a lot of individual variance when you deal with hundreds of people,
Yep.
especially in any situation. There's not really a situation where you can say, I wish I could give everybody the same plan. I wish I could give everybody the same diet. I wish I could do that. But then there would be no purpose of individualizing or adjusting things for an individual, which is the whole part of coaching. There's the science is out there, but it's more of like the structuring, the discipline, the adjustments and stuff that actually make it actually happen.
Right. Okay, last one. What promotion is your favorite to be at or to work at?
Honestly, like there's certain situations like being at events like one championship or the big events, they really do a really good promotion side of things. Sometimes it really just depends on where it is because the
Right,
crowd
right.
and the fans really draw the biggest thing about what makes the most.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, most fight weeks, you're in a hotel, like you're doing random stuff,
Bare Naked
like it ain't
Club.
glamorous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like sure you're in a different country, but like it's not like you get to explore.
Hmm.
So sometimes the location it really just matters on the fans. So fights in Ireland have been amazing.
Right.
Sometimes the fights in Canada, like sold out stadiums and like Toronto have been amazing with the energy.
Right.
I love Thailand because it doesn't matter if it's Channel 7, doesn't matter if it's Lumpini, doesn't matter if
Oh
it's
shit.
Impact Arena.
Yeah, sorry, man. Give me one sec. I didn't unlock the door. Give me one sec.
No problem.
We're good. We got a few minutes. Don't worry.
No, I'm good. Yeah, I don't know what your timing is.
Yeah, sorry. It's got a 1-to-1 here at 11:15.
Yeah, it's a lot of the time it's really just the crowd makes the event and the energy. That's why I love Thailand, is because it doesn't matter if it's the first fight of the night, it doesn't matter if it's every punch they react. That's why like Lumpini is amazing on any Friday. Channel 7. It's different with the energy of the gamblers.
Sure.
I've been
Yeah, yeah,
at
that's right.
been at
Channel 7 was
our
wild, man. You can't even hear the person beside you.
Yeah, like even RWS, been to a few of those events, been to Raja a few times in last month, just watching events and just so passionate people that just love this. They make the energy of it. Like it's a difference when you're trying to watch it at home or even like the UFC Apex is a perfect example because the UFC Apex with no crowd, it's great because you can
Oh,
hear the
man.
action, but
Everything. Yeah.
but it's that's the only thing about it that's unique. But everybody I know that has fought there, they go like it's just a different energy. It feels weird. You're like in this dead warehouse that's there's no energy from the people, and a lot of the fighters feed off the crowd, and that really gives them energy and makes them push, and like they're doing it because they can. It gives them like an extra boost.
You bet.
So that's a huge thing about between like Thailand and Ireland. Toronto has really impressed me a lot of the times. Like Canadian fans are very passionate when it comes to MMA, but like you can't beat an Irish crowd. You can't beat a Thai crowd. I'll say that.
Oh, man.
Regardless of the organization, it's
Yeah.
really the fans more than anything. I'm an MMA
1-2
based
fighting
person.
nations there.
Yeah, I'm an MMA based person. Like that's what I'm the most passionate about or watch the most. But like Muay Thai in the last several years has really, became a huge passion of mine as well because it's just such a beautiful sport. It's such a it's got so much culture and history to it all, and especially it's like a religion out here, especially spending so many months, so many times over this year in Thailand. You gain so much respect for the sport and what it does for people, and just a level of the athlete that needs to be at the caliber to be successful in Muay Thai is like there's no question of how good these guys are.
Man, you got her. Well, listen,
Do you
right
have
before we're out of
any?
here, just
Do you have
curious,
any
where? Oh,
question for yourself? Do you have
yeah.
any? No. Do you have any questions for me in a situation like that? A person that's been a fighter and a person that's been an individual that's cut weight or tried to manage things. Like, what is the thing where you have been the most curious about, or the thing that you'd struggle with when you
Yeah.
used to fight?
Um, again, I guess what I've learned from this is there's a lot of variables, but I would say one I bet a lot of people think of is, well, I even have it written down here. What are some general tips for using a sauna if you're trying to cut weight?
Yeah. And the things about fight week is the biggest misconception about fight weeks for a lot of people is that they shouldn't be eating. Like I have people eat 5 times a day, every single day until fight week. They're eating maintenance calories. Yeah, they're eating low carb, but at the end of the day, they're still eating maintenance calories. Some people don't eat on fight week. That's the biggest red flag when somebody's not eating. Like you need calories for energy. You got to manage the stress. But when it comes down to the heat, there's two factors. One, if you're doing a bathtub, it's typically range like 103 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit is probably a sweet spot. You got to go a little bit higher than that, depending on an individual, sure, but how he acclimated. But that's like a sweet spot for most people to manage. With a sauna, depending on if it's like a sauna box or a dry sauna, sometimes the sauna boxes you're pretty much maxing them out almost anyways. But and with a dry sauna, there's two rules. Don't use a steam. Don't use an infrared. Try to always, and if only you're going to use a sauna, it should be a dry sauna. And in that situation, it's because an infrared heats you from the inside out, so it's very hard for you to not overheat. So that's a very critical thing. Is that regardless of trying to manage the temperature lower, the way that it heats the body up to cause you to sweat is way harder for you to cause the same amount of sweat to not overheat. So an infrared sauna is where I know people that have cut weight for 30, 40 times and then they did it infrared once and they messed up and it really caused a huge problem. So that's the one thing is, and people that try to use a steam sauna, the ambient air and the humidity and stuff like that, you think you're sweating a lot, but a lot of times the moisture is actually kind of trapping your own sweat glands from being able to actually sweat excessively because you're soaked in so much water that's not available to evaporate for your sweat to keep coming through. And then you're kind of like an insulated layer, which is, fine for maybe a normal person if they like it, but that's not a way to cut weight. It needs to be a dry sauna. And if anything, it's probably like 145 to like 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Should be good enough for most people. If you have to go a little bit higher than that to about like 175, you shouldn't have to really go much higher than that. Uh, Most people, they always think hotter is better. If I sit there and just keep pouring water on the rocks or stuff like that, the hotter the better, the faster. No, you just need to find the minimal effective dosage to allow that person to have consistent sweat rate. Help manage them to not like overheat by cold towels in the face, ice packs, things like this. Let their head, because you really regulate all your temperature from the top of your head and the bottoms of your feet. So as long as you can keep your head cool, your body will still sweat. But the whole intention is to not be in the sauna for like hours. It's to raise your body core temperature so then you can get out and you can wrap and slowly sweat while you're cooling down and then get back into the sauna. It's not doing the whole cut in the sauna. You need to try to passively sweat probably half as much as you would be doing active sweating. Because if you're doing the whole thing all exposed to heat, it's going to be a problem. You're going to overheat. But you can manage dehydration very well. You can't manage overheating. So that's the problem that people get into is by pushing the duration in the sauna too long instead of giving themselves breaks to cool down or letting them mummy wrap or towel burrito, whatever you're doing, to allow yourself to passively keep sweating while your body core is slowly cooling down. Most people don't prioritize the wraps as much as they should, and that a lot of times should be about half of what your cut is because all you're doing in the sauna is to raise your temperature high enough so that you can sweat. If you're tolerant with the heat acclimation, as I've stated before, you can tolerate more. It's easier. You won't get overheated as fast. But if you get overheated, then you do need to take a break. And that's going to take longer for you to actually reset and be able to go back in there. So don't push it. If you need to stop it earlier, then, manage the overheating symptoms and cooling yourself down effectively. Because once you go way too high, then you're in a situation where you actually are forced to take breaks and forced to cool down, and that's why you give yourself more time than you think that you need. Because if you think you only need an hour to make that weight or 3 hours to make that weight, give yourself an extra hour, hour and a half. Because then if you're like, hey, I got 20 minutes left and I got a pound to lose, you have no other option than to just like overheat yourself. So it's a time management thing. And that's something you can kind of figure out with a person's sweat rate over time, how much time they actually need to be exposed. But yeah, that's more about the critical tips of coming to a sauna or a bath, but don't live in it and warm yourself up and then wrap yourself is always the best approach.
Nice. All right, man. Where do we that's it. I heard the podcast. I'm in. I'm hiring Coach TJ. How do we get a hold of you? Where do we see you? Where do we find you?
Are we making a comeback? Muay Thai World Cup. I think Kieran will give you a fight. Let's go.
Bro, I can't even walk yet because of my let alone fighting.
Yeah, it's funny. Trust me, everybody.
I know,
Some
just messing
people,
around, man. Where do we find you?
no, I'll get you a fight in Thailand. You fight a tuk-tuk driver. We'll figure it out. But
Now we're talking.
yeah, now we're talking. Yeah, that's the right play. But yeah, no, everybody is best to just reach out to me on Instagram, Coach TJW. Obviously, it'll be linked here, but also my website's launched, adjusting some things. It's the same thing, coachtjw.com. So you can reach out. I have some intake forms and stuff if you want to reach out to me, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. I'm very approachable. I read every message, regardless of which ones come in. And then I also have, I'm just going to give a slight shout out to my other business because this may attract for other particular individuals, is that I have another company with my business partner, Nick Baligas, and he's a professional strength and conditioning coach and at a very, very high level private chef. And we run a company called On Chefs, and that Instagram is on_chefs. It's optimized nutrition chefs. And we run a team of professional chefs that cook for professional athletes privately. So whether you're, a person that's needing a full-time chef in-house or remotely on location to manage things for an entire camp or a season or for anything when it comes to events or corporate things or something like that, we have chefs that we can send out for people to manage, doing the highest level nutritional knowledge, best plating and flavor, but also with the right nutritional structure for an athlete. So we synergistically kind of combine services to manage, making the best food, but fueling athletes the correct way too. Because I can cook some food, but I ain't a professional chef. Like I ain't getting no Michelin star awards out here. So I'll cook when I need to.
I hear you, buddy. All right, man. Listen, I appreciate the time. I know it's late in Thailand. I really first time doing any sort of podcast on diet nutrition, which obviously has been a massive and weight cutting, a massive part of fighting now. And I really appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, I know there's always different questions. Some people may have questions. I'm an open book. So anybody really has any questions out there that wasn't really addressed in this podcast, you can just reach out to me and maybe
Sure.
work with somebody if somebody really needs some help for their camp or whatever.
It's an excuse
I'm
to do it
open
again.
Yeah, I'm open to consults as well. But yeah, there's a lot of the times there's so many other questions that could be answered. There's so many ways that this could go. An hour or so is only so much you can really cover over. But it's a good podcast, man. I appreciate the time and appreciate the conversation. I know this would happen, and maybe I'll see you in April.
You bet, buddy. I'm sure we will. And if not, I'm sure I'll see you 10 more times throughout the year.
Yeah.
If not, and
Let's
if not,
see.
on my own TV as well.
Yeah. We'll see what I can do.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. Hey,
Appreciate
chat
it.
soon. Later.